leper? Scholars equate biblical leprosy to our modern day Hansen's disease. This loathsome disease attacked the skin, the eyes, the nose, and peripheral nerves. Essentially, with decreased sensitivity and the lack of blood flow to the extremities, patients simply rubbed off their fingers, toes, and noses. Consequently, it was not uncommon to see a leprous individual with fingers fouled to the bone, noses gnawed to the nostrils, and toes whittled to nubs. Leprosy. Necessarily, the disease mandated quarantine, according to Leviticus 13, and created strenuous separation between families. This incurable disease caused skin irritation, swelling on the body, and separation from the body. Victims lost limbs, livelihood, which disrupted social units. The separation severed not only the physical, it also severed the sociological. If the physical loss meant physical death, then the sociological separation meant that the leper died communally and ceremonially. Leprous people were not allowed to congregate in the community, nor were they allowed into the temple congregation. Protocol demanded lepers to cover their faces when nearing any uninfected person and bellow out the warning, "Unclean, unclean," to cautious people of the potential contagion. No one would dare touch a leper. In fact, no one would venture to come close, within 6 feet of a leper. Lepers were untouchable. Leprosy causes separation. As a spiritual equivalent, sin, like leprosy, separates. Sin causes separation between the human and themselves. Physiologically, humans and the world. Environmentally, humans and humanity. Relationally, human and the divine. Theologically. Are you a leper? Has sin separated you from God? The good news is Jesus touches lepers. In this text, Jesus heals a leper. Matthew presented this miracle as one of 9 between chapters 8 through 12 to affirm the deity of Jesus. Leprosy was incurable, yet Christ cured this leper. Verse 3, and Jesus stretched out his hand and touched him, saying, I will be clean. And immediately his leprosy was cleansed. Fascinating. Jesus exerted effort and expressed empathy. With stretched arm, he touched this man. He stretched his hand out and went the extra mile to heal this man. A word or a thought would have sufficed, yet Christ healed this man in a way that would make the greatest impact on the contaminated. Jesus did for him quite frankly, what only Jesus could do. Jesus touched him. Perhaps this man's greatest human need encompassed touch. Jesus healed this leper. Leprosy drove him to Christ. Christ drove leprosy from him immediately. The crowd affirmed it in Matthew 7:28. Matthew records that those who were there were blown away at his teachings. Those who followed him and were standing by are part of the crowd. Not only the crowd, but the contaminated affirmed the healing. He approached Christ in desperation, even though lepers were not allowed. And he asked after devotion. He knelt. The text says that he worshiped Christ. He affirmed Christ's deity, calling him Lord and expecting him to do what only God could do, heal a leper. But the ceremonious did not affirm it. There is no record exists of the man showing himself to the priest as Christ instructed him. The leper is healed. We affirm that. It affirms Jesus' deity, and we celebrate with the contaminated. We celebrate with the crowd. But guess who's not celebrating? The ceremonious. Why didn't the ceremonious affirm his deity? The reason the ceremonious, priest, the elite, did not affirm Jesus' deity is because the contaminated did not obey or offer. Jesus commanded, "See that you say nothing to anyone, but go, show yourself to the priest and offer the gift that Moses commanded for proof to them." Verse 4. Sadly, Mark commented on what the former leper actually did and its results. But he went out and began to talk freely about it and to spread the news so that Jesus could no longer enter a town, but was out in desolate places. Mark 1:45. Had the leper obeyed Jesus and followed protocol in showing himself to the priest for proof of healing, the priests, by their own standards, would have had to affirm the leper's healing, to affirm that Jesus healed him, and by extension, affirm that Jesus was God. The ceremonial certification would have gone something like this: leprosy was incurable. Only God could cure leprosy. Jesus cured the leper. Jesus is God. Yet, this man did not conform to the commands of Christ to shut up and go up. Notice one negative command: do not publish this event, and one positive command: go show yourself to the priests. Jesus' gag order and go order had little effect on the former leper. Consequently, his disobedience drove the divine to desolate places. Jesus' plan to overcome the obstacle of the obstinate priest by the obedience of the offering of the obedient leper failed. But instead, the leper opted for self-evaluation and elevation over Christ exaltation. The leper could have more fully affirmed the deity of Jesus had he simply obeyed and presented his offering. The true affirmation was in the obedience and the offering. Conclusion? Well, this text screams against self-promotion. Although the leper testified accurately, his testimony lacked approval. This oracle spoke out of order. The testimony resounded accurate in that it reported the details as they really happened. His testimony lacked approval because he had not received Jesus' permission to publish the events. While his testimony bore witness to a real experience for which Christ was the cause, he didn't have permission to proclaim the message. An oracle out of order? Sure. For example, if you asked someone to spell the word word, the responder may reply with the letters D-R-O-W. While those are the correct letters, that's not how to spell the word word. The individual letters D-R-O-W may be correct, but they are out of order, thus they inhibit communication. Simply put, the leper's testimony was out of order, out of sequence with Christ's instructions. Consequently, it prevented a clear communication of the affirmation of Christ's beautiful deity. We must learn to exhort, worship, and promote Christ the way he commands us to worship and not the way we choose to promote him. Promoting the works of God without conformity to the Word of God amounts to disobedience. Frankly, a testimony without a life of obedience to Christ results in a colossal waste of time. Christ gave the contaminated man a clear command, yet the leper chose not to conform to Christ's command, but to celebrate. Do we choose to celebrate over conformity to Christ's command? Have we chosen self-gratification over God's glorification? To please ourselves over pleasing and praising God? Have we chosen to party without permission? Have we chosen to preach or praise without permission? God specifically designed our lives to reflect a particular kind of glory. When we choose not to obey his commands, his word, we short-circuit the full current of God's intended extrinsic glory. When we attempt to shine, we deflect the glory of God. When we disobey his commands, we shine less. No doubt about it. This demonstrates a failed evangelism. But there is a message for us. We can learn to obey and give our testimony. Then we can be certified and Christ can be glorified. Are you a leper? I was separated from Christ, alienated from the commonwealth of Israel. And I was a stranger to the covenant of promise, having no hope and without God in this world. But when we were far off, Christ condescended and made us near by stretching his arms at Calvary and touching us in our separation and commanding us to be clean. Live well, hope well.
Trouble will let the ways. There will be better days for